segment of the new podcast, New Elder Wisdom. Um, really excited this morning here, dropping in with a dear brother, Adam Bear, out on Whidbey Island this morning. Adam is he's many things. He's a Renaissance man, is what he is. I probably should have written a bio. I'm like, I know him well enough not to. So let me know if I get it correct. Adam is a carpenter. He is a lifelong student of martial arts. He is a practitioner of biodynamic craniosacral. He is a leader of men, a father of two daughters, a husband, a son, and a bear for sure. Met a lot of guys claiming the name over the past handful of years, and this brother really teaches me some good bear medicine. He's a man of the body, a man of the heart. He's very dedicated to in revealing the responsibilities and possibilities of the masculine in educational and spaces that are really unified in this emergent culture of to meet what's needed in the now, what's happening now, an emergency, perhaps a crisis. And so, Adam, to begin, I realize a lot of time I end up telling the story. So today, I'd like you all good connections begin with a story. So if you would tell the story of our meeting and some of the subsequent consequences of that.
Mhm. Yeah, well, it's a honor and a privilege to be able to sit down and record a conversation with you. Maybe our first recorded conversation, maybe the first of many. Um, yeah, well, I was living at this sweet little spot deep in the woods, and my landlord was around, and she said, "Oh, you have to meet my friend. You have to meet my friend Hunter." And at the time that this happened, I would say I didn't feel a any real I don't think I had any real strong, um, relationships with men here where I live, and I also was feeling somewhat, of a lone wolf for sure in my physical locale. A lot of relationships, but a lot of them social via just having kids and family, social gatherings and whatnot. And I have been holding this question for a long time of, what is needed and like where are the men who are having the real conversations. And at that time, I had recently gone through my first like LT training with Sacred Sons. And then yeah, this walk down the driveway and in amongst the trees and there's this, you know, big tall dude with a head full of dreadlocks and all of my all of my projections, of course, the projections that you're already so familiar with. I probably had some projections, but ultimately in that moment, the thing that was most alive for me was looking for men who would be willing to engage and show interest in this emerging men's work, which at the time, I was just fresh in. So it was like, hey, I got to tell you about this thing, the Sacred Sons, and getting involved in this men's work and da 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 da, and and you took to it, and that part of the story is not mine to tell, but I don't think that at the time, because I have had so many conversations with men over the years that start out very similarly, with me being very excited and passionate about something that I'm feeling is very real, and 95% of those conversations don't continue. And so ours was a conversation that actually continued.
Mm, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that moment of meeting, really snowballed. Just to give the people context, it was 2019, 2020.
Mhm.
I
It would
don't
have
know
been
if
2020. Yeah.
yeah, springtime, maybe early summer. Yeah, I remember. And next thing we know, did we do leadership training too together on Maui?
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, no, you went out before I did.
Okay. But then it quickly became us co-hosting events for the Sacred Sons, immersions. I think we did 3.
Yeah, we did 3. And just to get the history correct, you went for Prime, and
Mm,
then we were in LT2 together on Maui.
that
Yes,
was it. Yeah, I thought we were together because there
we
was a
were.
bunch of Pacific Northwest. That's when we met Red Light
Yep.
at dawn and Bryce. What's Bryce's last name?
Gil.
Bryce Gill. And this movement began, here in the Pacific Northwest, and we, brought forward this culture together. Did some bigger events together. How many EMXs did we do together?
I think we did 2 or 3.
Only 2? I think it was, yeah, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couple
It'll,
immersions, couple EMXs.
yeah. And then continued to build personally together, constantly in conversations about what we see and what the bear sniffs out, um, in his explorations and curiosities and contrarian nature. Um, yeah, it's really been a beautiful thing, and so thank you. It's a rare and precious thing to meet someone who is a signpost in the road of life, and so you've been that for me. And here in, New Elder Wisdom, we're looking to highlight those kind of things, these synchronicities, these relationships that can be described as karmic, and that a large amount of activity comes from them and can be um, a large amount of healing can come through, which there has been, as well as some fresh wounds. And here with the concept here of new elder wisdom is that we're bereft of elders in the Western society, and the relationship of creating space for the elders needs to be cultivated. And I see you as someone who's lived into that, but I'd also like to give you, an opportunity to speak to your relationship with elders. Were they present in your life, even one or two? Do you agree that it's missing
Mm,
from society here in the West, so called?
yeah. Well, I there's a few things I would love to answer that question, and I also want to acknowledge something that I'm feeling when thinking about yours and mine, our constellations, our stars meeting, and that was that I feel like we actually kind of, in a way, witnessed each other's uh, growth into a different phase, like into a new phase.
Hmm.
Um, Mine being like that or at least I felt like you have witnessed me actually becoming a man. I think when we met, I can safely say that I had not actually stepped into like my embodiment, if you will, of masculinity. I was still struggling a lot with the responsibilities of service to my family and taking care of people around me and really showing up fully and being as strong as I can be. And and for me, seeing you and witnessing you evolving from your being a father of now adults. At the time, you had your daughter was in, I believe she would have been like early in high school maybe, and seeing a man who's actually cultivated his family life and his children growing up, and then seeing you stepping more into that elder role within the community of Sacred Sons, of course, but then also as a mentor, someone to look up for me. So that's been a really special part of our relationship, is just seeing each other growing in that way. Um,
Yeah. Can I speak to that
yeah,
before we
please.
get to the
Yeah.
question? Thank you for that. Um, for me too, what you were able to witness was me coming out of my tower and coming into the social cultural realm to a much deeper level than I ever had before. Um, and got to, have all this great witness to that emergence and to Yeah, with you, it has been amazing. I remember the first DMX calling in the elements, and you're just like looking at the ground, walking this little circle, and then slowly that you began to spiral out, and your chest is lifted, and and learn to command the space, in a really powerful and positive way. So,
You told me, you said, something to the effect of, you said, "Speak to the elements, not about them."
there was that too, and anyone out there knows they got a bear in their life. Sometimes, they're so good at finding the scent, and then they follow in their nose down low, and so you got to remind them to stand up sometimes. And yeah, and that whole learning of breaching the Western block of consciousness of, yeah, we're not giving a lecture here. We're actually calling them in. We're relating to them. That Yeah, before we go too more, deep into that, because I do want to follow the thread of our
Yeah,
relationship throughout this.
yeah.
But to come back to this query, is there a longing for elderhood? Has that been a theme throughout your life? Where were the places that you saw glimpses of it?
Mm, yeah. Well, it's interesting because my life as it is currently in my profession as a carpenter, general contractor, is an extension of the probably one of the first relationships I had with the elder, and that was my grandfather. He wasn't my biological grandfather, but I spent the most amount of time with him from the earliest, like he held me as a baby, and then passed away when I was 13 years old. And he was a brick mason in rural Virginia. And I think just the relationship to this particular man, I won't spend a lot of time on it, although I could. It's like the feeling, the somatic experience, if you will, of being held and being feeling very safe with this particular um, elder, my literally my grandfather, and what it and how his impact in my life, both cognitively, being aware of him as a man, but also the deeper the deeper energetics of being around him, being held by him, being nurtured by him, sitting on his lap, driving the lawnmower, and then becoming a man of labor, because as I was coming into my own adulthood and needing to provide for a family, the thing that was deeply on my mind was, if I'm gonna do something, what am I gonna do? And I was looking to the men who I had come up around to with inquiry, like, who do I know? What have I seen? And what's the path that makes the most sense to me? And it was that path. It was the path of labor that I had really only seen and known him in my life, who had been that kind of man. Um, and it's proven to be a very worthwhile path that I've chosen
mm,
to follow, sort of in a way, follow his footsteps. The other elder that I can think of would have been my uncle, who is still alive. He's in his early 80s. He's my godfather, my father's older brother by 10 years. And his and mine is a tumultuous relationship because he was very strict and set a very high expectation for me at a very early age. And it's funny, we were just together physically having this conversation, and he was saying, like, I said to him, you create a really high expectation that I didn't always wasn't always in agreement with, and I didn't feel like I had the space to give an agreement to. But as I'm getting older, I'm seeing the how challenging the responsibility to be an elder might be, to balance and to walk that path of, like, there's a responsibility to call men forward into integrity, right? And for me as a young man, I wasn't always making the best choices, and I was becoming my father. And my uncle saw that and was like, "You're, I'm not." He was essentially doing everything he could to make sure that I didn't make the same choices and the same mistakes that my father made. And so we clashed. There was a lot of clash between the two of us. So my relationship to elders has been both and all of those things: tumultuous, challenging, confronting, nurturing. Um, and so I feel very fortunate that I have at least two solid examples of both how to be and sometimes maybe how not to be.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Dang, beautiful. That's very rich. I always like to highlight polarities when they show up, right? And so you had this polarity in your life of something that brought you to ease and something that brought you to attention, um, and maybe begrudgingly so, right? So ease and rigidity present in the polarities of the relationships, and each with their gifts. Um, and I've been thinking about this a lot. I was actually writing last night about like this archetype of the lecturous elder, right? And like how that becomes part of the dynamic of why elderhood is missing to a certain degree, and how there's still this impulse, this longing to be in a place of teaching and to protect and to care for, because the school of hard knocks is what it is, you know and yet there's also the shadow of power playing out that can come with disciplinary militarized mindsets. um, even industrialized mindsets can become rigid into command, and into the command of power in a downward way. And so how do we cultivate, as men who are now leaders, a listening within that, but also know when it's time to be like, yo, as also, our relationship is demonstrated, sometimes sharpness is needed. And it's like, actually, we're gonna take this up a notch. We're
Yeah.
gonna require this much more of the men that are here now. And we learned a lot by doing that constantly, with each other. Um, and
Yeah.
also, yeah,
If you want to finish that thought, go for
yeah,
it.
I'll just finish and then pass back to you. It's just the labor thing, because it's similar for me, this is how you earn, and just to highlight how strong the impulses of class still are within our experience. So yeah, brother.
Yeah. It's I think at least as far as, relationship, as stubborn as I am and can be, there there's all I think somehow I've designed this way or I built it in like a fail safe, to hedge against my own my own tendencies. But it's like I think knowing that to see for me, I have to remind myself that I'm only going to rise to the level of, like, those who I'm looking toward, right? And so I have a tendency to think that, maybe I'm already where I'm supposed to be, or I've already cultivated myself to a high level, or and this is something I think that came out of being a lone wolf was like, deluding myself into believing that I had already maxed out, right, as far as development and maturation. But the failsafe was like, "Hey, you got to be able to," and this is me speaking to myself, it's like, "Hey, you gotta be able to, um, recognize the real, right? And recognize the qualities in another man, um, based on the information that's present, right? Does this man have a family? Is he still married?" There's like and these are just my own kind of ways of discerning how do I orient to, um mentors. Let's just say mentors first, right? Because I think the mentor kind of in a way ties into an elder. But like how do we become into relationship with the elder? And for me, that was what it was. It's like, okay, I can see that there's something here that I am either longing for or that I already know that I need, right, for my own development. And in some ways, and I don't, we can go deep into the culture. We don't have to. For me, what keeps coming up is that there are ways for us as men, especially the younger generation, and I feel like I'm in between at 38 years old. Um, there's ways for us to hide from it and to only step in like until our identities start to get pushed on. And then we can back out and run. And we see that, right? We see it when men do get called forward, when young men start to get called forward, that there's I don't know what to call it, but it's like, no, I'm gonna turn and just I'm gonna like make a pivot and go in this direction over here. And hopefully I'll find some way to not have to be challenged by more wiser, more experienced men.
Mm,
And for me, my pivot is like I'm aware of it because I feel it internally. It's like, "Oh, okay, dude, this guy's like maybe," it's like back to my uncle. It's like, "No, he's got some of that authoritarian Saturnian energy." But then I push myself right back into it. I'm like, "No, like there's something here. That's why it's challenging. And if I keep turning from these things, then I'm never going to really grow." And I think this is true for life as well as being surrounded or surrounding myself with those kinds of men who will challenge me to become something more. But I have to also be willing to put down my identifications.
right. In so many ways, I see what we do is addressing, if we could simplify it all down, is to the identity crisis of men. Um, yeah, this is such an important topic, such an important aspect of personal development is to be able to recognize when our own resistance is the way to the path, the discomfort is the way, that the friction is the school, you know. Um, and on the other side of that, for me, you really taught me how to be honored, you know. I was always like kind of one of those people who'd be like, no, 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 like don't sing a happy birthday to me, those kind of things, and throughout the Sacred Sons culture, that I learned to be honored, which I believe is a way to make way for elderhood and to also to continue to be in touch with a continuous willingness to give from the position of elderhood. And sometimes that invitation is not there, and to know when one has to invite oneself to take it upon themselves and to find a way to do that that isn't so abrasive that it fractures the relationship, but in a way that true power, what is real, is commanded, and the opportunity for newness is always there, within the invitation, to be in that now, in that new old way of, okay, moving on into the cornucopia of our creativity and collaboration and sovereignty, which is, really, what we're dealing with so often in this resistance is the shadow of the sovereignty, right? Because as we grow up, laborers, I had kids are young, you had kids, pretty young. And it's like, okay, it's go time. And I'm either going to rely on someone else to pay me or I'm going to rely on myself to pay me. It's been a mix of the two for both of us, coming up in the labors. And, for me, always like with certain bosses, like I could do this better. This is a moronic way to do it, but, then learning, that it's not always as easy as I say. Um, and how that translates into the body. You spend so much time in your training, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, kung fu, um, taking care of yourself, functional movement, in order to maintain not only for the work you do, but also for the cultivation of consciousness, right? And so I'd like you to speak to that, embodiment, such a big word, somatic, such a big word, and there still seems to me to be this refinement is always towards materialism to a certain degree or to a large degree, so I would like you to speak a little bit about how movement has has taught you about yourself, consciousness, presence, and what you can cultivate through motion?
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of just start with a little bit of a description of what it was like for me to actually enter into my body for for I would say more or less the first time. And I was I was 20, 21, 22, something like that, and I started doing like core power yoga. I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and I found yoga and it was incredible. And many people will be familiar with this sort of the path of finding yoga at a young age, or maybe not. Um, and that helped me just to actually like meet my body, but I wouldn't say I was really fully there. And then I think when I started having when I became a father at 20, 23, 24 years old, and then again at 26, um, there was a high level of like just flat out disassociation, and the physical labor, the gift that was given to me through physical labor, framing houses, um, farm work as well, a couple years farming on Maui, was, I became very aware of the misalignments, the imbalances, and also just the sheer level of, discomfort that I felt in my body. Um, and, on the level of, like, well, any of that labor really, there was, I spoke about this before, there was a lot of like I had in order to start the next day, in order to actually function the next day to get up and go do it again, I had to spend a lot of time with myself and with those misalignments. And um, I just kept getting more and more curious about uh, the benefits of, for me, it was slowing down at first. It was the invitation to slow down that came through really introductory, elementary, um, play, we could call it, with Tai Chi movement. I won't even call it Tai Chi, but it was just a movement that was like, an exercise that's very closely related with Tai Chi training. And the slowing down was, I think, in many ways, what kept me in my body and kept me, um well, it wasn't really keeping me anything. It was just it brought me back over and over again. But there was an element, so slowing down and getting soft are two of the things that have been the most profound teachers for me. One, for me growing up, I have the nervous system that was a product of physical and emotional abuse in the home. Um, and so what we might call like a ADHD kind of thing, I have that, but I've never been diagnosed. It was just like it's a hyperactivity, it's
Yeah,
anxiousness and
agitation.
agitation, never okay with just like being right with the moment. Um, and so the slowing down was the counter, right? It was the counter to what was already happening inside of me. And it was the medicine. It was like a daily dose of medicine, like purposefully, intentionally slowing my body movement down so that I could connect um, with the layers of tension, the layers of pain and discomfort. And then ultimately it became about the breath. And through the slowing down, then I was shown and have been shown how to get really soft and to keep getting softer. And I think in some ways, my life's path will be to continuously get softer and softer and softer. Um, because I guess from a standpoint of consciousness, there's a reshaping that has taken place for me over the course of almost 2 decades, right? There was the waking up and entering phase that lasted for almost, I would say, almost a decade. My entire 30s was about waking up and and entering into my own space to reclaim it, and that was all about slowing down and getting soft. And then the creative forces, the universe, the creator, right? Like shaping and starting to mold and make space for something that was going to be something that's new. And that's when, only then did I start to receive more teachings about alignment and also about contraction. So I didn't have any I was actually turning away from it on purpose. For me, it was like, oh, it was like Tai Chi is the way. That's the way. That's how I'm gonna become strong. And like I'm gonna be like one of those old guys who could throw people across the room, and legs like tree trunks. But when I look at it, when I look back at it, I see the intelligence, at least for this body, I see the intelligence in the design of rather than learning how to contract first, I had to be taught how to be soft so that I could be with what was already there. And then I started receiving this like more intentional, okay, now we're going to put you back together and we're going to make you stronger than you were before. And that has literally been what's transpired over the past 6 years or so. And it's a work in progress.
Mm. Yeah, it beautifully highlights, I think the experience of so many of the men that in particular that we've interacted with is this ADHD consciousness, this agitation, probably comes with some contrarianism, some, a little throwing a dash of self-destruction and this general state of unease that can lead to recklessness or recluseness, right? Kind of like drives into either pole. We've spent a lot of our time with that polarity, the ones who have pulled away from life, right? Pulled away from the body. It's like, whoa, the body, that thing hurts all the time. And my experience was very similar, how I came into the somatic arts. It's like I'm like near broken from getting my PhD in gravity by being a dry lay mason and an arborist. Um, and so again, there's that window, right? That paradox of human experience in the three dimension, that pain becomes a door, the consciousness of pain, becoming conscious of pain and consciously moving towards it in order to remediate it really in the beginning, right? And we find things and we get some relief and we have the way. It's a very masculine thing to do, right? I've been similar, to be like, I don't need anything else. This is perfect. I think a lot of men do that as well. And I think it's important to a degree because in this cultureless culture, discipline is not given within these embodiment arts. What we had like the presidential fitness challenge when I was growing up, but we didn't really train for it or anything in my school. Maybe a little bit. Um, so the culture of coming in is in this language of movement, right? And I also see, you said putting ourselves back together, and so much of what I see as well is this compartmentalization. It's, I think, I've done it. Every man I know that is potent and powerful and needs to get out of his own way is compartmentalized a bit. There's a disjointedness to the doing, the thinking, and the feeling. And so the body reflects that, right? As we use it in the labors of our day and the coming together, this unifying the community again of the body is such an important piece of what we do with the men. Adam and I are going to be working together again soon, just in a couple weeks. We're doing an event I've been thinking about a lot today, and you're really touching on all the things about what I want to have happen in the short time, and I want them to slow down, just like you highlighted as being the first step. And so I feel really a lot of alignment with you, where we get to create right now live time in front of the people and unify our through line, to bring down the pace, to settle in, you know
Mm,
and then we can move from there, because we've seen other things like the last immersion we did, that this is not just a concept that the soft tissues hold, the trauma. People are really think about their nervous system a lot. I think we need to speak as much about the soft tissue and the information that's stored there, and the willingness to move through it, and how we've learned to support people with certain rituals, one known as the incarnation squeeze, which we used on an immersion. I don't know if you remember, and it actually it uncovered a little too much, for
mm,
the setting, right? Not to tell the man's story, but he required care. So I feel like that's the place where we can continuously meet, you and I, in the language of the body and in what we want to bring forward culturally, um, is the culture of coming home, right? To self, coming home to self.
Yeah, and it's a it's a medicinal it's a medicinal it has medicinal uses and so many medicinal uses, and it meets, I guess we could say it's a polarity to what is really being offered. And the 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 cultureless culture that you're speaking about, at least from my perspective, is foot on the gas and foot on the brake at the same time. This is the experience I also had as a laborer, which was everything was about you got to get it done really quickly. It's move, 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 move. And at the same time, I'm being asked to also learn something and like develop a skill set at a high level. How am I supposed to do both of those things at the same time? I see this also as very problematic for these younger generations of men as well, which is things are being offered so easily, and yet no mastery is really being there's no, put it this way, we know that in order to master something, it takes a lot of repetition, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of practice. But the process is not something that's being promoted. The process that's being promoted, as far as I can see, is the quickest route to the most exposure, or the quickest route to being the most influential. And so influence and skill level don't actually, they're not, um, they're mutually exclusive, but they seem to be going together. It's like, if someone has influence, then all of a sudden it's assumed that that person has skill. But this is what I love about physical labor, especially for young men, is that physical labor and the skills that are developed through labor don't lie. If the thing isn't plumb, if it's not square, it's not going to stand up. And that's true for the individual as well. I can accumulate all kinds of modalities, right? I can accumulate all kinds of identifications. The world is offering them to me at a very low price, and I can go and I can grab them all up. But there's going to be a point in my life, in my development, where that structure that I'm standing on is going to be tested. There's going to be a storm. And if I haven't built it properly, because I've been in a mad rush to accumulate, uh, again, influence, or accumulate just validation, it doesn't, it's not going to, it doesn't, I didn't build it correctly. Well, then what do I have, right? And so this is where I want to keep encouraging, at least from my standpoint, I want to keep encouraging young men is to, when we're looking at what are the right choices, how can we make good use of our time? We want to slow down, which is really important, but slowing down and being more intentional with the skills that we cultivate, and the acknowledgement that going from one thing to another to another to another is not a plan for sustainability or for mastery of anything. And I apologize if I took us too far off the
No, man,
track.
that's so beautiful. No, I think it's really important because ultimately the yearning of masculinity is to be in mastery. I think it's really important stuff. And for me, like even in my education, I got to go to Waldorf school for third and fourth grade, and there's construction, and like I was busy. I was always building stuff, and I realized how important that was and how important it was in keeping me grounded. Um, Throughout my time. And I also, it's like, sometimes I like to run funny imaginations where I think about like alien archaeologists coming down like 100 million years from now and being like, they'd call this the age of quotes and 6 to 8 week challenges. They'd be like, what was this 6 to 8 week challenge? And so I always look for a reflection of like, here's the distraction, 6 to 8 weeks, and then it's done, right? Race to the end. It's a period of time you can race to the end, have massive transformation. And then what, right? And so, yeah, I think it's important to really think about things in terms of the 6 to 8 year challenges.
Yeah.
right? And right there in the middle is 7. So we have these cycles. So there's always in the distraction, there's always a reflection of the truth,
Hmm.
right? And that was a big marker for me. At 35, I committed 8 years to studying under one teacher, and and shifted everything. And a lot of it had to do with just putting my identity down at the door. The identity that I had forged so hard out of the fire of youth, right? The steel gets very hard with the fire of youth. And, so to be able to learn for that period of time, and I'd be bored sometimes, I'd be like, learn something new from the simplest foundational thing. Um, so I think it's really important to highlight, within this pursuit of the embodied masculine, so to speak, the balanced masculine. It's so much of the way that we get the men to show up, right? Is to put them in discomfort, be like, okay, no more running.
Yeah.
We might have to break out the Sananga at this one upcoming. We'll see. um,
Yeah, well, it's like, too, again, back to these fail safes, like the stories that we tell and the for me it was very visionary. Like what I saw with my eyes, those were the stories that I ended up utilizing and cultivating to tell the story that I want to tell with my life. And early on, it was I've talked about this before. It's the Ninja Turtles, right? And there's archetypes in each of the four Ninja Turtles, but they also had Splinter. They had a master. They had someone that they had to come back to and that they were being held accountable to. So when they went out to fight crime, but they made a mess, right? They had to come back and Splinter would it was like a check-in. It was like, okay, well, where are we? What are the problems that we've created and how can we improve the systems? Any I was just thinking about this, like any solid structure in our current world and reality, anything solid from radio towers to buildings to you name it, anything that's solid and is going to last for more than a decade, maybe 100 years if we're lucky, maybe more, was built by someone who spent a long, long, long time cultivating a craft and understanding that structure. Same in the old way of apprenticeship, right? If a young boy was going to learn a skill, his father, most likely his father and mother, but probably his father, was going to have a relationship with a craftsperson of some sort in a village or maybe a far off place, and that boy would be sent to learn that craft so that he would be, in a sense, guaranteed a way to make money and provide for himself. Similar to the martial arts, in the time before the internet and the time before airplanes, you didn't get to like I didn't get to go and just choose like, "Oh, yeah, you know what I wanna do is I wanna learn this style," and then, like, I would go pick it. That's not how it worked. You would get the style that was available to you in that area, and then we would just train that style. And if we were lucky enough, or if we had the gusto to say, all right, I think I've learned enough from this particular master, I need to go and learn from another master. But there's this continuation of like, I have to root myself somewhere. Otherwise, I'm going to be responding to, again, back to the culture. It's like responding to an uprootedness, an anxiousness, an inability to just to be still and to take what is being offered before saying, this is what I need. This is what I need. This is what I need. And
or in men's spaces, this is what I have to offer.
exactly, showing up ready to facilitate when you haven't done the work to deepen in and understand what's even going on, that this isn't about individual skill sets. And I'm like first one to raise my hand, right?
Same way.
I showed up and I'm like, dude, these guys need to learn some qigong. I need to teach some forms, right? But now understanding that, oh man, like it's not even about that. It's just about being prepared. It's about being prepared to answer the question or to ask the question, what is needed in this moment, and I think men will find that they have more to offer we have more to offer, I think, when we come and we show up uh, as an empty vessel than we do if we come with our credentials and our certifications.
Yeah. It's such a tender space, there's so much expectation, potential for disappointment, projection, anxiety going into these spaces, and so much of what we learned is to bring them deeper in that in order to give it some space, right? To
Mm,
finish the contraction. It's almost like there's all these unfinished contractions within the groups of men a lot of time. And so we say, okay, like let's go even deeper into that. And then boom. And hopefully they can catch a breath. And often they do. Right. And then the longer work, the 6 to 8 year plan, um, is to continue to find ways of offering integration spaces so that a man less and less needs to be seen outside of the creation of his own culture of marketplace, and to just be present with what's happening, to accept leadership, and to speak truthfully to his impressions of what's happening. And it is a minefield, um, and one that I continuously learn from. I'm looking forward to going into that learning again with you. And so you have really, it's, I like our relationship because I feel like in the past 6 to 8 months, really, I've gotten to learn again from you. Like in the beginning, you brought me away, and then it switched, and I became the mentor, and we lived out that cycle. And we're able to stick together after some conflict at a sticky ending a little bit. And then in that, I was like, I'm gonna learn from Bear now. Actually, I'm gonna watch what he's doing. He's got his nose to something good. And so I guess the question is like roses and thorns around holding a local men's group,
mm.
integrating that local tribe into what you're doing, what your broader vision is, after kind of coming away from the noise of a national movement or international movement, and really kind of settling into that slow. How has that been for you?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yes, we have a local men's council about 2.5 years deep. And once and now for I think over a year, we've been doing 2 meetings a month. And the roses really are about the deeper connections I have with a few men who see the value in building a local community. And even if that was the only if that was the only gold, I would say that was mined from this endeavor, or the rose that comes from this, is that I've just deepened connection with a few select men who have shown up to help lead, right, and to help shoulder the burden, and the responsibility. Then I would say it's been very successful. Um, the challenges are, firstly, it's personal, and I'll take responsibility for it, which is that the thing I hold probably the closest is this sense of emergency, like you said. Like for me, I live in a very small community, quite rural, and it's a it's kind of like it's a little experiment because it's so small and so contained, and it's actually an island, which makes it even doubly isolated. There's this question of like, we already know what the indicators are. We know that, ecological, economic collapse of some kind, we're in the throes of it. And it's like hospice time on a cultural, economic, socio-economic scale. It's hospice time, right? And for me, that brings a sense of urgency. Hey, how are we going to break down these private, isolated, familial, economic structures in a small community so that um, we can live abundantly together, right? So that we can start to sort of share the load. And that question is something that I don't I guess if there's an expectation, which is that more men are gonna show up to ask these questions, right? Like, "Let's get experimental, guys. How are we gonna do this?" Right? And I get real fired up about it. I'm like, "Let's go." And I don't and it's hard to get men to come out of the comfort of, "Hey, I'm busy. Oh, I have a thing coming up. Oh, yeah, my this and this and this. Oh, I can't make it tonight because of this and this and this and this." And it makes me sad. It makes me really sad. I feel sad about it because if we can't come together for 2 hours once a month as a group of men who live within a 10-mile radius of each other, we drink the same water, we eat the same food, right? We all I mean, we're sharing the same environment on all levels, and we can't come together as a group for 2 hours once or twice a month. Then what chance do we stand to face the bigger challenges that are in front of us? And I'm not doing it. It's not like I'm doing it right, right? All I can do, I'm in the same boat as everybody else. I've got 17 different plates spinning any day of the week, but I'm still showing up for these meetings, and that's my commitment. That's my commitment, and that's on me. So the thorn is that sometimes I wanna get really, really, really fired up, like, go full bear and grab men by the collar, right? Like, with the teeth and drag them to the circle,
Mm.
but, I can't do that. But maybe I can, I don't know, maybe that's what they're waiting for, I have no idea, I can't figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, it's really tough with men, to get over that initial hurdle of approaching themselves, which is really what the circle is asking. It's like, come to the circle so that you can sit with yourself, right? And that is a big ask a lot of time. And I hear you too. It's like, why is it not a priority? Why would you plan something? And I know you've tried other ways, 6-week segments, the dates are not mysterious. It's they're known, and it's like,
Mhm.
well, you know, yeah, what is the relationship to it? Um, and I would just give an example of kind of the opposite, because in terms of the questions, I haven't formalized it locally here in Seattle. I tried in the beginning, but it was a little bit of the same, too much satellite, not enough continuous path. On a small community is interesting, but then we have, what's known as the shred shed, which is 3 days a week, and sometimes it's just me and red light. Like last on Friday, there was 6 of us. There were 6 of us. Yeah. Um, and so in leadership, there is this need to set that foundation of, like, I know you were there. I know Wesley was there. you know, Makeda, he was probably there. Was Makeda there? And so sometimes when there has been a great starvation of culture, faith is needed, right? We need to continue to be okay with that. We have that, and you really began with that. It's like how I became closer with a few men, right? And that becomes, I believe, becomes a social beacon for others, and I've been thinking about this a lot too, because I just created this container for older guys who want to look at this question of what it means to become an elder, what are the responsibilities, and how can we support the process. And a lot of it is listening to men such as yourself and your experience with leadership, your growth in leadership. And there is this other piece about the youth and the relationship to them. And is there this middle passage, so to speak, where it's somewhat of a dead zone with men? Like the emergency isn't sharp enough. Their body still works pretty good. Their marriage is okay, it's fine, and there's like this lethargic kind of settling into the comfort of, at least it's known, but it is no longer evolving in life. And that can be, yeah, it can be a potent form of anesthesia for sure. And so how, and is the way, because young men especially today will be here, there, and everywhere, but can we engage, this is a question I'm asking myself, can I engage the youth anew in a way to really call them in, to give them that to show them that foundation. And I'm not giving up on the middle-aged men by any means. I like want it more and more. But I guess I'd call you in, if you're listening to this and you're between the ages of 35 and 50 and you found you haven't learned anything new recently, you haven't listened to what a younger person has to say, you haven't challenged yourself, it's time to consider those things. The invitation uh, of life is to always, come into the continued struggle of becoming, of unfolding as a human being. And so, Adam, you've been an inspiration to me, continue to be. I look forward to what's to come, conflicts included. And but I know that we have a much clearer way of interacting with each other than we have in the past. I'm really realizing, just looking at the depths of the things that we can cover, we're going to give it to them in bite-sized pieces, so this will be the first conversation of many. um, I think it's an important one. I love cold calling people, but this guy, he cold calls me, man, and I can't tell you how good it's made me feel. He's caught me on a bunch of moments. This is some elder wisdom right here. Cold call people when you think about them.
Hey,
Reach out,
bring back the cold call.
bring back the cold call. Exactly. Um, and before we step out for the day into this beautiful Pacific Northwest spring day, one, I want you to let the people know what you're up to. If there's things you want to share, I know you have an online school going. And any closing thoughts you have around what we spoke of today, or what's emerging for you now at the tail end of this conversation.
Mm, yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, so I've got the Bear Cave, which is an online circle platform. And in the spirit of asking questions, the question with the Bear Cave is, can we utilize the technology to reignite and build um, a martial brotherhood? And it's not primarily focused on martial arts, but the training that's involved in developing both internal and external structures for longevity. And as far as yeah, um, yeah, keep just practice. And this is what I've learned from you, Hunter, so much is you have reflected back to me the power of asking questions. And I would say don't underestimate the value and the power of asking a question, and how it affects reality, right? When we ask a question, we are energetically and in so many different ways acknowledging that we don't know, and that's really the place that we are here to move from. It's from a not knowing rather than a knowing. So thank you, Hunter, for continuing to lead us in that way and remind us of that, that's the best way to walk, the best way to be of service.
Yeah, the Dionysian mystery of unknowing. Only one prayer needed, right? Teach me to show up for what's needed in any version. And so, yeah, I look forward to continuing that prayer with you, Adam Bear. And man, there's no telling what might happen. So yeah, thank you. Love to your family. Thanks for taking the time today. We didn't even really get into the work you're doing with Tyson, so let's just leave a little drop here for our next conversation. Adam has been moving deeply into working in spaces with Tyson Adams. And who's the other brother you work with again?
Travis Walls.
Travis
Yeah.
Walls.
Yeah. Yeah, we're thank you for bringing that up. Just yeah, so we're getting real curious with merging men's work with some psychedelic work, with sexual alchemy, sexual shadow work, the unshaming process, really bringing men more into a place of trust and vulnerability with other men, which is a continuation of the men's work, but specifically looking at the ways in which sexual shame keeps men imprisoned. And for one of the things that Travis has really brought in is is looking at post-capitalist realities,
Mm,
and he's doing some amazing work down in Costa Rica with a group of people at Brave Earth to really look and ask indigenous and asking for indigenous wisdom as well as wisdom from our modern world as to how are we going to traverse these this rocky terrain that we're currently in, again, economically, politically, and all the other ways.
mm.
So yeah, we're bringing it all, trying to bring it all together.
Beautiful, man. Yeah, I look forward to diving into those topics and more in the future. And so thank you again for being with me today. Signing out.
Thank you.
Yeah, brother. Love you, love you.
Love you too, brother.